What is up, YouTube? This is your host, Ranee B, here to spill that homicidal tea. And we are bringing some old tea back out for a cup of historic vengeance today. You guys know how much I love vigilanteism. Like long, well thought out vigilante justice. And if this is your bag, baby, man, this is the story for you. Just the other night, Azel, my video editor, she was over and she was in front. My husband and everybody was outside because we were making pizzas, and the new pizza oven. Oh my God, the uni's awesome. I'm not even getting paid to say it, but just buy one. They're awesome. Anyway, I said to my husband in front of her, just to show her the level of psycho that I am, hey, who is my favorite person ever, living or dead? Without a beat, boom, he says, Clara Harris. If you don't know who Clara Harris is, oh my. She was the Houston dentist that killed her husband who was cheating on her, but only after he had promised her that the affair was over, and that this was after she did everything that he wanted her to. Plastic surgery, new hairstyles, color, clothes, everything. She lost a ton of weight. Still, that motherfucker met up with his bitch mistress. So Clara finds the hotel where he's at, the same hotel they got married in, that fucker. And she waited till she saw them come downstairs. She sees both the bitch and the cheater. She proceeds to bitch slap the hoe and scream at her husband. He pushes Clara to the ground. He escorts his whore to her car. Well, Clara had had enough. Now, she, along with her stepdaughter, and that part I don't agree with, but hell yeah, she gets in her badass Mercedes S430, like the mafia type car of the late 90s, fucking runs him over. Not once, bitch backs up over him and then runs him over again. Oh, no. And then runs him over again. Dude, good. I was, anyway. Yeah, so she got locked up for 15 years, sentenced to 20, but whatever. I love her. So the reason that for this story is to illustrate that almost on a clinically disordered level, I love vigilantes. So who would even come close to my idol? Clara. That would be old girl Marianne Bachmeier. Dude, she's awesome. I love her. So let's get into it. The solved homicide case of Anna Bachmeier and her badass mother, Marianne, as well. Okay. So this is not the normal way that we do things here, but let's just start by watching this little video clip. I want you to notice her cold, icy stare, and then I want you to notice how she doesn't even try to run or struggle with any of the officers afterward. It's pretty surreal. How do you get to that point? I mean, what led her to these events? Let's begin with learning about the woman in the clip, Marianne Bachmeier. Marianne, she was a woman that grew up in a troubled household, peppered with physical, drug, emotional, alcohol, all that abuse, and an incredibly unstable home life. Divorces, different men in and out, substance abuse, like I said, the whole gamut of every negative thing that could be unloaded onto a kid, basically what Marianne's childhood looked like. Naturally, she started to look at leaving at home at an early age and immediately latched on to the first male figure that showed her any real attention. But beating her to the punch, Marianne's mother kicked her out when she accused Marianne of causing tension between herself and the stepfather, whatever. So Marianne, she needed a place to stay after she graduated from high school. She started waitressing and discovered she actually liked that whole stay up late and get up late lifestyle. Who doesn't? When she started dating the bar's manager, Christian Berthold, they were both working at Tapasa in Lubeck. Now, their relationship remained on and off throughout the following years since she started working there. She became pregnant for the third time at the age of 22. This time, however, it was different. She wanted to keep this child because she was older, and she also thought that she could, she was more equipped to take care of a child. She had given the other two children up for adoption, and she really just wanted to make things right this time around. She'd felt so lonely and awful in the years after giving up her two previous daughters. She couldn't stand to lose another. So after finally deciding this, Marianne also made the very difficult decision to raise her child alone because Christian was just not prepared to enter into a committed partnership or be a dad, period. On November 14th, 1972, Anna Bachmeier was born. Now, Marianne went ahead and she got her tubes tied after the birth of Anna because Marianne was wild and free. She just wasn't the type to want a bunch of kids and a typical nuclear family, you know? I mean, in no way did this mean that she wasn't interested in being a mother to the child. Her entire life was entirely focused on her infant. Now, little Anna was known to Marianne's friends and customers at Tapaza, and she integrated Anna into every facet of her life. This novelty, though, it quickly wore off, and Marianne found herself unable to cope with the difficulties of being a single mother. She needed the money, so she had to return to work, and she brought Anna with her to work, and as a result, it was said that she never felt the need to rush home after her job behind the bar. She could just start partying there. Anyway, so Anna was known as a joyful and adventurous child, and even as she grew older, even though her surroundings, they completely supported her being a young, moody, unhinged personality. But Anna's mother, Marianne, treated her like a miniature adult. And from a very young age, she was expected to take care of many of things on her own. Now, as Anna got older, it could seem like, from the outside, that Marianne was being somewhat uncaring toward Anna. She pretty much grew up at the bar. She was frequently seen dozing off while her mother partied the night away. It was only on the rare occasion when they would go to trips to the countryside. Marianne, Christian, Anna's father, who the bar manager that we talked about earlier, he was her father, but not nearly a hands-on father. But anyway, these are the only times that provided Anna with any relief from the bar life at Tapaza. I mean, Anna's life was set against the backdrop of the late hippie culture in Lubeck. So her mother worked and socialized at night and slept during the day. So there were just no rules and everything was acceptable. And as night turned into day, Anna played outside on the cobblestone streets of Lubeck, basically unsupervised. So left to her own devices, Anna quickly learned how to be sociable. Everyone knew little Anna. She was so gregarious by nature, and she enjoyed entertaining the various pets in the neighborhood and was known to be on a first-name basis with most of the dogs and cats that lived around her. Now, on the date of May 5th, 1980, it was just like any other day. Marianne and Anna, who was 7 years old, had a huge blowout the day before, and things between them were still tense. Now, I don't know how much of a blowout you can have with a 7-year-old, but I don't have kids, so maybe it gets contentious, who knows. Anna left the house, but made the choice not to attend school that day, much to the chagrin of her mother. Marianne, she was a part-time photographer, so she had a photo shoot with a nearby newspaper in that afternoon. She fully expected Anna to be home when she returned, and it was alarming when she found that Anna had not returned home by the time she got back. So she set out to look for her. She couldn't find her anywhere. Once the street lamps came on outside, Marianne knew what she had to do. She had to go to the authorities. The following day, Anna still had not returned home. Now, Marianne, she still had her wishful thinking. She assumed that Anna was over at her friend's house and just hanging out somewhere else to spite her mother because of the previous day's argument. But meanwhile, what Marianne didn't know was that just a few miles away, a woman entered her neighborhood police station that afternoon and informed officers that her fiance, Butcher Klaus Grabowski, 35 years old, had confessed to her a horrible crime. The woman claimed that Grabowski had indecently assaulted and murdered a young girl named Anna. Who's Klaus, whatever the fuck his name is. To begin with, he fucking lived next door to the Bachmeiers. Okay, so he was familiar with Anna since she frequently spoke to him, mostly on whether or not she could play with his cat. On May 5th, Anna was walking home from her friend's house, and she encountered Klaus Grabowski, and she greeted him with the usual, pleasantries and asked if it was okay if she could play with his little kitty. I mean, how innocent is that? Well, Klaus said sure, and he asked her to follow him up the stairs to his apartment, and the two of them entered his flat. His fiancée was not home at the time, so he had the house to himself, and it proved too much of a disgusting temptation for him. That's the last time that anybody would ever see Anna alive. Grabowski told his fiancée about what he'd done, and she instantly left the apartment and went straight to the police to report what happened. Grabowski placed Anna's body in a cardboard box and somehow loaded it onto his bicycle and rode it to a spot on the canal's banks where he buried her body in a shallow grave. Grabowski, he wasn't home when the cops came, but he left a note. He was begging his fiancée not to leave him. I see what he was concerned about. He promised to meet her later in the evening at a neighborhood bar called Zollern. so they could talk things out. I don't think this is a talkable thing. Police, they awaited his arrival at the bar, and he was quickly apprehended. So let's dig into Santa Claus, his past. Grabowski, he had a history of sexual offenses dating back to the early 1970s. All kids, great. A 6-year-old girl who managed to flee from him was his first recorded victim. He pursued her and eventually caught back up with her, seizing her and wrapping his hands around her neck. He was forced to release her because of how loudly she yelled, "Go, girl." He was lightly slapped on the wrist with probation. For what charge? Attempted murder. Dude, can you imagine dating a new person? Meeting them out to dinner or whatnot? Listen, I have to tell you something. I'm on probation. Okay, well, I mean, everybody makes mistakes. What for? Attempted murder. What?
I'm a little freaked out.
What? Yeah. I didn't even know they had probation for that. But anyway, back to old Santa Claus. He resumed his hunt 2 years later, not letting something like probation keep him down. He was accused of sexually abusing 2 more young children in 1975. He received a psychological examination, and the results of which were read in court. They were unquestionably convinced that the accused's abnormal sexual desire was an addiction. Shut up. And that the accused knew that his behavior was illegal, but due to his addiction, he didn't know it was right and wrong. He was considerably constrained in his ability to prevent it. Give me a break. In 1976, Klaus Grabowski was found guilty of molesting the 2 girls and sent to a mental health hospital. He was chemically castrated as a part of his recovery. Now, for many years, chemical castration has been a contentious method for treating sex offenders. In order to reduce testosterone, offenders are given stilbestol, a non-steroidal estrogen. Now, benperidol is an antipsychotic medication that is occasionally used to lessen desired impulses, the sexual impulses of these people, but it has no effect on testosterone. Chemical castration is reversible in contrast to physical castration. If you don't know what physical castration is, just ask the local dogs in your area that are males and you can't see little danglers. Yeah, completely unreversible. Grabowski was given the option to accept this chemical castration in exchange for his release. In the absence of that, he would have to spend a substantial amount of time in a mental health facility. So, yeah, he consented to the treatment and was carried out. He was once again a free man.
What?
Unbelievable. But wait, there's more.
No more.
What's even more unbelievable is that there was no additional care or integration support, as they put it over there. He was supposed to have received more counseling at this critical time, not just the chemical treatment, but he slipped through the cracks. Oh, big deal. Well, he slipped through the cracks so much that he visited a urologist 2 years after being freed, asking for hormone therapy. In other words, to have the chemical castration undone. Due to his reports of physical side effects of the castration he received, the court said, okay. But it required this to let him out, and now he doesn't want you. Okay. Boy, things were sure working out for old Kris Kringle Claus, that fucker. He had a new fiance by his side, and he wanted to have kids. Why? So you could have a local person too. Anyway, the treatment, it seemed to be effective. And, Grabowski, he was changing his life according to the court. Dude, really? He received testosterone, an injection on March 18th and April 25th of 1980. Remember, we're talking about May 1980? When this all, yeah. He was given pills to consume at home, and it was assumed, luckily, not never checked up on, that he was receiving psychiatric care when he was treated, but that was not the case. The urologist didn't even follow up. So he found out that Grabowski lied to him about seeking mental health support, but didn't report it. He later acknowledged that he had no knowledge of Grabowski's background and that he simply provided physical care following the undoing of the castration. Well,
Great job.
Now this is where the anger starts. Grabowski admitted to authorities that he never planned to molest Anna. After being apprehended, he denied even touching her. He said that Anna had seduced him. 7-year-old, oh my God. Center myself. Ugh. I had a hard time even typing that shit. A 7-year-old sexually seduced you, you sick fuck. Grabowski's defense was that Anna claimed that she would blackmail him if he did not participate in sexual activity with her and give her some money. Oh my God. Grabowski also claimed that he experienced both terror and rage at her propositions, and that he would return to prison if she accused him of abusing her, and his fiancée would break up with him, and he wasn't about to become bankrupt. Who did this little girl think that she was making these threats to? Well, it's fiction, you fucker. That's what it is. But anyway. Well, he made the decision to strangle her to death once he saw his fiancée's stockings out of the corner of his eye. Impulsive, huh? Anyway, yeah, no, it wasn't planned at all after you did what you did to her. The box, her makeshift little coffin, was discovered by police at the location where Grabowski claimed to have buried her. The tiny body inside of it was carefully placed inside after being hog-tied. It was determined that the murderer took his time. The murder of her daughter was reported to Marianne Bachmeier that evening. Marianne's response, it seemed odd to the police. She refused to talk to the authorities. She wouldn't go to the morgue to identify her daughter's body. Police were unsure how to handle this issue because they'd never seen such a response. I can get it, though. Like, whenever I am faced with something really traumatic, I break down. I shut down. I break down, too. But, yeah, I shut down. So I can totally get it. Anyway, that's just me. Marianne, though, she was just devastated by the news, and she battled emotions of guilt. She hated herself for thinking of leaving Anna in the hands of friends at one time. She even had approached a couple to see if they wanted to take her temporarily because she knew she wasn't being a good parent. That never came to fruition, but she couldn't believe that she even thought that. And then she thought about the argument the day before she vanished, and there's nothing that could repair what had already been done. So she made sure that Anna's funeral was anything but formal. She didn't want a religious service, but they set up Pink Floyd to play loudly in the church, which I think is awesome. The time leading up to the trial, oh my gosh, now it seemed to go on forever. Marianne, she had experienced a lot of pain in her own life, but she was not willing to let go of the loss of her daughter and just move on. She occasionally broke down in front of customers at the bar, and, no matter how many times she retreated and was tried to be consoled with by, the locals at Tabasa and her friends, it didn't seem like anything helped to console her. So, I can't see how you can. It's got to be awful. Grabowski's trial began on March 1981 at the district court in Lubeck. Now, statements about Anna's childhood during the early days of the trial claim that she essentially grew up on the streets, that her mother worked as a waitress and stayed up late, sleeping most of the day and partying all night. Now, Anna didn't attend classes regularly as she should have, and she met Grabowski, occasionally getting to know him during this time while she was out and raising herself. Grabowski, though, he was more than just a kind neighbor and a friend. He didn't admit to any mistreatment of Anna, but he did admit to killing her. How is that any better? But anyway, in order to see the monster who had kidnapped Marianne Bachmeier's daughter, she made sure to have a front seat in the courtroom. She was very vocal and even occasionally would yell, "Say something, you pig," whenever he would take his time on the stand saying something. It's got to be tough to listen to court testimony about your daughter's murder. Grabowski described her daughter's final moments in detail in the actual death to the court. He explained how he came up behind her and she was sitting on a chair, and he said, "I choked her until I heard something come out of her nose and I was fixated, and then I couldn't stand the sight of her body anymore." Police rather described the scene where they had found Anna's body and discovered on the second day in the trial. And now in the courtroom, there was a commotion over the fact that little Anna's body was hogtied. That has to be torture. Later that day, Marianne Bachmeier overheard a conversation, possibly misunderstood, a conversation between the judge and the defense lawyer for Klaus Grabowski, according to witnesses. She believed that Grabowski was about to get on the stand the next day and tell his disgusting tales of events where he thought that Anna was trying to seduce him and blackmail him. She couldn't hear this. She just dreaded it. She was furious. She said that she had previously experienced sexual abuse and she was a victim of sexual assault as a teenager. She had a violent father and stepfather as well. And shaming the victim, especially a young girl like this, just was not acceptable. Wasn't going to happen. Day 3 of the Klaus Grabowski's trial March 6, 1981. It began on a chilly, rainy, of course, Friday morning in Lubeck. And since the doors to the public were only open for 5 minutes before the session began, there weren't many people in the courtroom. From a side door, a man entered the room and led Klaus Grabowski to a chair on the dock. Now, he sat facing away from the door. When Marianne Bachmeier walked in the courtroom, she noticed that there weren't very many people in the courtroom. And, her friend said, let's just go wait outside in the hallway, and just started going toward the door. Now, Marianne turned her back on her friend and calmly walked over to where Grabowski was seated and turned around. Taking a .22 caliber Beretta out of her purse, she pointed at Klaus, whatever, and started shooting. 8 shots were fired by her, one of which is the only one that didn't hit him. 7 struck the killer in the back. He simply sagged onto the desk in front of him, fell on the floor, and passed away a few seconds later before a doctor could arrive on the scene. Good. Anyway, Marianne put her gun down and surrendered to the officers in the courtroom. There was no struggle. There was nothing. She reportedly said at this point, I wanted to shoot him in the face. Unfortunately, I hit him in the back, but I do hope he's dead. Well, girl, you got your wish, because he is good for you. Christian Berthold, the father of Anna and Marianne's ex, he was present, and he muttered, she did it. She actually did it. Christian, what are you doing? Shut up! Don't say that! Oh my gosh, with that 1 to 2 sentences right there, you just proved first-degree murder. What separates first-degree murder from second-degree murder is premeditation, and that's what those little sentences you just said. Oh, fuck. Anyway, the case would go on to become one of the most well-known instances of vigilante justice in German history. The media and the general public responded strongly to Marianne's act of retaliation. Everyone who had children can completely understand why she did it, and many people said if they would have been in her position, they would have acted the same way. Me too. Anyway. Some even said that they would have done worse, that the suffering inflicted by the shooting was insufficient. Agreed. Overnight, Marianne became a household name and a celebrity throughout the nation. The Revenge Mother label was applied, and the newspapers and magazines just couldn't get enough of her. They featured pictures of the attractive 32-year-old and splashed photos everywhere. From total strangers, she received flowers. A card with a note was attached to one of the bouquets of flowers, and it read, from a grandfather who would have done the same thing. You're not alone. Courage. Support came from many Germans, too. A week after the incident, they gave 100 Deutschmarks to Marianne Bachmeier's support group with the intention of covering her legal costs. I love Germany. I'm going to have to move. The public believed an eye for an eye. Justice could be justified, given the nature of Grabowski's crimes. But ironically, Grabowski had not yet been found guilty because he'd passed away during the course of his trial. So as a result, he passed away a free, lawful man. Yuck. Not in my memory. In the prosecution's case against Marianne Bachmeier, they faced a challenging task, though. She was not eligible for forgiveness because if vigilante killings were permitted, anyone could start enforcing the law on their own. So the public, however, put a lot of pressure on the authorities to show her mercy. Everybody was watching the prosecution to see how she would handle the case, how they would handle the case. But despite being detained on August 14th, due to the information that led authorities to believe that she was a flight risk, Bachmeier was released shortly after her arrest. Now, over a period of roughly 15 months, she made 5 attempts on her own life, and she was detained pending trial. She, in order to prevent irreparable mental and spiritual harm, doctors and psychologists advocated for her release, just saying she wasn't the mental facilities to be locked up. But in the meantime, the prosecution, they had a job to do. You can't just go kill people. So they had to establish that she had planned this attack in order to, convict her of first-degree murder. And then bingo, they had their golden ticket. Christian Berthold's statement that he'd made shortly after the shooting. This demonstrated that Marianne did not simply shoot in the heat of the moment, and that rather she had probably planned the entire thing and discussed it with Christian. Oh, Christian, why?
Are you stupid or what?
Investigators discovered that Marianne had bought a gun and had been practicing shooting in targets in Tapaz's cellar. Marianne acknowledged purchasing the Beretta. She bought it from a customer, and she hid it at Anna's grave. She claimed that after Anna was killed, that she started to feel unsafe and that she bought the gun for self-defense, not for murder. But it was her intention not to shoot Grabowski. The trial began, and the prosecution reminded the court that Marianne, who had risen as femme fatale, the revenge mother of Germany, was in actuality a neglectful mother. Now, during her trial, Marianne became somewhat of a celebrity. It was remarkable how she posed for the cameras and seemed to lap up that attention. Now, usually defendants they charged with murder, they try to avoid the photographers, but not Marianne. Didn't sit well with a lot of people, and although she had a lot of support, there was something off about her demeanor. But this is the first time she was ever in spotlight. You know, she was ignored as a child. She was on the fringes of society, you know, drug addiction in her family. This is the first time she was noticed. So I give her a break. Anyway, when it was time for the verdict, everyone was on the edge of their seats. It could have gone either way. But you know what? In the end, the murder charges were dropped. Instead, she was convicted of manslaughter and unlawful possession of a firearm and sentenced to 6 years in prison. Prosecutors were outraged. They were like, oh my gosh, there was complete, obvious, you know, proof that it was a case of malice afterthought. But she was in no imminent danger. She wasn't provoked. Grabowski sat with his back to her, didn't threaten her. I mean, I can kind of see their point, but at the same time, well. I mean, she openly admitted that she had the pistol in her handbag when she went to court the previous 2 days, too. And the fact that she'd brought that firearm in the courtroom, prosecution argued, showed intent. Whatever. Anyway, the judge, on the other hand, he felt that justice was served. He says she did not at all pose a threat to society and that the killing was a spontaneous act caused by the trauma of the courtroom. I can see that. So, I mean, now, one witness that claimed that there was a folder that had Anna's makeshift shallow grave, like the details on it in the courtroom, and Marianne saw it before shooting Grabowski. So I could see that. Before the judge, that was enough to have been a trigger to cause an unpremeditated attack. Marianne, she was able to walk out of that courtroom as a free woman, and she was only required to go to prison at a later stage. She was put on suicide watch and spent the first 18 months of her incarceration in a psychiatric facility. She was released in June in 1985 after serving just 3 years. Now, she did admit in another interview that once Grabowski was dead, she felt like she could breathe again. She said she was sorry that it happened, but she didn't feel sorry that he was dead. She really just didn't show any remorse whatsoever, and that's okay in my book, because I mean, she owned it, she's proud of it. He's gone, he's not going to injure any more kids, so kind of thanks, Marianne. Well, I mean, and how sorry was she supposed to feel? I mean, the man that killed her daughter and also was a predator to all these children was dead, so I'm sorry, not sorry. I mean, anyway, you know how I feel. After the trial, she only served 3 of her 6 years. She was released, and she sold her story, and they turned it into a film, and they showed it in Germany, and it was called Anna's Mother. And she didn't want to be known as Anna's mother anymore. And she said that she wanted just to kind of be her own person and let it be something that had just happened to her rather than something that, you know, kind of formed her. So she got married again, and in 1998 she moved to Nigeria, and they taught German at a German camp. They later divorced, and she moved to Sicily. Unfortunately, she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. While in Sicily, she was a hospice nurse, and that was when she found out that she had terminal cancer. She moved back to Lubeck and had a videographer take her final days down as kind of a, I don't know, kind of a homage to who she was outside of being Anna's mother. Now, she wanted to be buried in Sicily, Palermo, where she had spent the last decade of her life so much. That didn't happen. She was buried with Anna and forever entombing her as Anna's mother the exact way she didn't want to be remembered. This was a dark case. Have you guys ever heard of this one? I agree with everything that she did, though. I mean, I can't say a bad thing about her. You know, I mean, I don't like the way she was raised, Anna, not so much. But I mean, what can you do? She was a young mother. She did the best she could. So, yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. Because, I mean, you remember, it's free. You can say whatever you want here. It's a safe place. So, yeah, anyway, let me know what you guys think. And we will see you in the next video. Bye.